Okay, good afternoon. Today is February 6th, Tuesday at 2 p.m. This is the meeting of the Finance Committee. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Roll call vote. I'll start to my right. Councilmember Osornio. Here. Councilmember Rocha.
Present.
And Mayor Craig is present. All are here. We'll go ahead and move on to public comment. Public comments generally are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. I may further limit the time depending on the agenda schedule. So with that, we'll go ahead and open public comment. Does any member of the public wish to comment on items not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Nobody online, is that correct, Abe?
No comment on
Thank
online.
you. We'll go on to consent. We'll need approval of the minutes of January 9th.
Motion to approve. Second.
Okay, motion made by Councilmember Osornio, seconded by Councilmember Rocha. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. On to the considerations. ID 24-053, the potential extension of Measure G sunset date. And I do believe we have Selena here to speak, our Assistant Finance Director. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Deputy Assistant.
Assistant.
Assistant. Okay, I got it right the first time. All right, I just wanted to make sure I was giving due credit. So,
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee chair and committee members. I am Selena Andrews, Assistant Finance Director. The item before you is a discussion and action and potential extension of Measure G. To provide some background, it is a 1-cent transaction and use tax approved in 2014, November 2014, and collection started in April 2015 for a period of 15 years until sunset. I'd like to go through the financial impact. The city does receive about 32 to 34 million annually, has received over the past 3 years. And these monies are used to enhance city services through the operating budget, and specifically police, fire, public works, recreation, community development, finance, HR, and admin. There are about 107 FTEs budgeted through Measure G for fiscal year 23-24, as well as transfers out to pay some debt on the police building and some internal service funds. It also finances some of significant capital projects, and it's anywhere from 76 million, which was appropriated in through the first year, 15-16. Provided here is a graph, and this actually came from the Salinas plan, where it outlines the structural standing of the city. And as you can see, there is some in the near future, there are some deficits that if Measure G goes away, that we would have to fall into. With that, staff is available for questions.
I'm wondering if you can clarify, so it's the potential extension of Measure G sunset date. Wondering what exactly you're asking of us here in the Finance Subcommittee.
We're asking for a discussion and a potential recommendation to go back out to the voters to potentially extend the Measure G and have no sunset, period.
Great, thank you. Okay, I will go to my left for questions. Councilmember Rocha, do you have questions?
This may be a question that can't be answered here, but do you know if it's possible to, as part of putting it out to the voters, include in the ballot statement language something that would make this in perpetuity, similar to that of Measure E? I believe Measure E was cemented into in perpetuity for a stream of revenue for the city.
Correct, and that is the intent and the discussion for today.
Okay, that was my only question.
Okay, questions, Councilmember Osornio?
Yes, if there was a recommendation, I guess the recommendation would be, do we go back out to the voters and do this? I mean, what would that look like if this body would say yes, and then it'd go to council? And as far as timelines, or how do you see that what do you see the next step after this?
So the next step would be to do some polling. There are agencies that we can work with that would go out to the voters and see what the potential of this passing would be. So there's quite a bit of work that needs to happen before it actually goes on the ballot, and it would be in 2024, this year.
And then how long would that, you said 2024 of this year?
That is correct. So it would be in this election.
This election? Okay. No other questions?
In terms of polling, I would assume they'd have to be, are they Salinas citizens? Are they registered voters? What type of polling are you, what does that look like for a tax measure?
There are firms that specialize in revenue measures, and it would be Salinas residents.
Salinas residents, so not necessarily registered voters.
I couldn't answer that question, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay, that's fine. So theoretically, you're looking for a recommendation from this subcommittee as to whether or not to kick it to council, I would assume, here comes interim city manager Pia.
She was doing fine, but as she stated, we're looking for your input, whatever that is. We may not bring it back to council until it's time for you to tell us and the community we're going out, whether that's May or June. It could be as late as very early August. We would have a lot of work to do. We'd have to look at the polling. So we can do things between now and then without the full council, like the survey, because it doesn't rise to the level of cost, et cetera. And they can all go away based on when we come back to you. That's similar to how Measure V, which turned into E, occurred as well. So we're mainly getting your input. We're flying very high in the sky to try to get that input from you. We think that this is more than just funny money for 15 years. To your question, we are asking like V to E in permanency. We're not asking for another 15 years. We think a general election, this time frame, is a good time to start, especially if the answer is no by the community. But these funds are lifeblood to this city, and not just extra money for streets or sidewalks, et cetera.
So would there be any consideration of the recent polling that was done about what the appetite was for, say, a Carr Lake Parks improvement? Big Sur Land Trust recently did polling, determined that the voters were not ready for that. I'm wondering, do we take any of that into account or consideration, or what does that look like? Or they're doing their own thing and we're going to do our own thing?
It's a very fair question. We were not included in that information. I certainly was not included. The city was not the client of the poller, and no one has shared that information. We, of course, here need 50% plus one to make it happen. The polling, I believe, when we did V to E, it was in the low 60s, so we were able to clear that. But yeah, we're just, I wish I knew more. There are two different taxes. This is a transactional use tax, that was a property tax, so there were different nuances to that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's all questions for me. I will go out to the public. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this item? Anyone online?
No comment received.
Okay, great, thank you. And we'll come back for final comments and direction. I'll start to my left. Councilmember Rocha.
Thank you. Just some points of clarification and also to share some of my experience. So when I was on the school board, we went out for a bond measure in 2020 and it passed with over 60% of the vote. So I'm relatively familiar with this process, having just done it not too long ago. What I would my recommendation is for us to move forward with this immediately, to conduct polling rather quickly, and to have it on the agenda sometime before June for the city council, because we do need to have this, if it's the will of the council to put this out to the voters, before the August deadline of when you have to get onto the ballot for the general election. So the deadline begins in July and sometime in August. So I think that would be my suggestion. I think it would be good for the council as a whole body to be committed to putting this out to the community, even for a poll, and certainly the discussion that comes after that. When we worked with the consultant on the high school district, they essentially polled the voters that would most likely come out in that particular election. And on top of that, the consultant provided the board a series of questions that the board could get behind as a theme for the basis of going out to the voters for the ballot measure. So I think that that would be very different from what Carr Lake is putting out. I think certainly for us, themes could be critical pillars of funding for the city, over 100, paid positions of the city, certainly serious budget shortfalls by 2030. Those could be, themes for us that would be incorporated into the poll that the consultant would do. And those reasons are the reasons why I support this going out to the voters. So happy to make a motion. I move to proceed with proceed with sending this to the city council for consideration to go out to a consultant to do polling and to move forward with getting this on the ballot by August.
Just clarification of the motion, if you don't mind, so that I understand, and clarification from the city manager. Are you asking for us to give a recommendation to council to go out to polling, or are you asking us directly to start with polling and then take it to council?
I think the motion is for you to receive the report and provide whatever ideas you have. We are inclined to do some of those things, but you don't need to motion them today. It's to receive the report.
Okay, then I'll take back my motion. The only thing that I would say is I'd rather the council give the direction to proceed with polling. I know that it's expeditious for us to do it, but I just want to make sure everyone's on board from the beginning. That way, by the time it gets to the point of putting it on the ballot, no one could say, oh, I didn't know about this. Why did you do polling? If we're all on the same page, we do it together. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Osornio.
Thank you, Mayor. So I agree. I think that, and I know we've had a couple of conversations as far as starting to look under the hood and see kind of really what voters would like. I do also think that while we're going to be doing some polling, we'll get a lot of that data. But what I would like to see is as soon as we start engaging the public, some of the things that come to mind are like, reasons to get large groups of people together and kind of really talk to them about if this passes, this is what we can continue to do, these funds, this is what they're a vital piece of our budget. And, I hate to think about it like that, but I mean, even raise the question of, so which one is the first, where are we going to start cutting from? Because that's how serious if we don't get this money by 2030. And I think that that's an honest conversation that we have to have with the voter. So while, we don't want to, scare anybody, I think that the severity of in 2030, if this does not get passed again, I would hate to have a board that says, where are we going to start cutting employees from, right? I mean, but that's unfortunately the reality of this. So again, I would just like a lot of community engagement. Sherwood Hall comes to mind. It's one of our biggest places to be able to put people in. I think maybe somewhere over 800, 900, maybe 1,000 people fit there, maybe a little bit less. But I just think that while we do the polling, when it comes time to community engagement, I think that we really need to entice people to get out there and really know how serious it is to get this information. So that would be my only ask is while we're doing this and putting out there as a campaign, some of those community meetings are really well put together. Thank you.
I certainly am supportive and was part of the council when Measure G came forward, and quite a few community members participated in bringing Measure G to the city for approval. I I know that there was question back then about whether or not 15 years was enough time. Interestingly, that I'm here T-minus 8 years later, and we're talking about extending it. So I certainly agree with my two colleagues here that we should bring it forward to council as soon as possible. I would say, though, if you do hear rebuttal from Measure G or what the money has been spent for, just to make note of that and to be conscientious of that. Sometimes we operate in a vacuum and aren't always great at hearing all sides of an issue. And I think it'll be important to determine whether or not we want to spend city time and resources. Well, I should clarify, educating on Measure G if the confidence of the voters is not there. So I just want to be clear about that. Okay, direction clear enough? Excellent, thank you, Ms. Andrews, appreciate the presentation. We will go on to 24-054, the annual budget community sponsorship policy. And we have Ms. Andrews, our Assistant Finance Director, here again to give the presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee chair and committee members. The item before you is the annual budget community sponsorship policy draft. Sorry. As you may recall, in prior years, the City Council has demonstrated its support through the annual budget process to outside organizations that provide a benefit to the city. The sponsorships are provided in cash or in-kind services. In the prior year, City Council asked staff to develop a process in which to award such sponsorships. In your materials is a draft policy, and staff is asking for your feedback and council direction on the proposed process. Provided here is a list of citywide sponsorships. While not all of these sponsorships were part of that particular sponsorship process, it is important to note that all programs funded through the general fund are funded through the general fund, other city funds, or through a reduction in fees. I'd like to point out some of the sponsorship-funded agreements through funding agreements, and that's the Air Show, Carnival, Hartnell, Five Cities, Rodeo, and the Welcome Center. So here's an overview of the draft policy. Your feedback will help staff ensure a process is developed as we work with City Council and the community to determine its budget priorities. Staff is available for questions.
Okay, I'll start to my left. Councilmember Rocha.
Thank you. My only question is, I'm looking at the procedures. Do you have a specific application deadline in mind?
So that is a great question. We will have to be proactive in this process, and through the budget, identify how much we are going to provide to the community through this sponsorship. And so it'll determine on the process that we identify. So we don't currently have a deadline, but everything will have to be communicated. So this is just a very initial draft. We are thinking that we could provide a dollar amount during the budget process, and then continue that process, create deadlines for applicants, review, and to make determinations.
Understood. That was my only question.
Okay, Councilmember Osornio, questions?
Yeah, one of my questions is on the procedure number 5. Is there a way that we can change where if the decision made by the city manager or the decision made if it's not approved, that it could be appealed?
you'd like it to be appealed, absolutely.
And then the only reason I ask is because right now what I've run into is somebody that has done some community events and definitely in a circle with a lot of folks that do community events. What I have found is that sometimes there's like, whether it be an application process that may be a couple $100, or in some cases, there may be thousands of dollars that they have to, it might be a nonprofit that they have to apply for. If that's a yearly event, something kind of like the Asian Festival or something like that, Salinas Valley Pride does a pretty good one. El Grito, I saw El Grito on there, but again, when you think about the magnitude of those events, and these are 100K events sometimes, $4,000, $2,000, it just seems like maybe there might be a process to which, if it's denied by the city manager, if it could come back to some type of body to just be reconsidered. I don't know if that's something that could be done, but
Logistically, that would make it a little hard. I think we could
Okay.
probably consider including language that any requests that are submitted are reviewed with council.
okay.
And I think that would probably make for a better process, more transparent process.
Okay. I think that's the only one I could think of. I probably have some for, will I have a chance to kind of comment after? Is questions and comments, Mayor?
I'll go out to public, and then you can come back for comments.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I do think it might make sense. I've seen this over at the county. The county doesn't particularly have a strong policy in place in terms of community benefits asking, and it turns into kind of a hot mess in their Board of Supervisors meetings, because then you have the Girl Scouts asking for funding up against legal services for seniors, up against El Grito, and if there's a potential way, I mean, I know with CDBG funding, there was like a subcommittee that was created that sort of gave a recommendation to council, and that was vetted, and the applications were vetted, and, that was kind of a cleaner process so that it wasn't a hot mess of who's the better nonprofit up on the dais, and then obviously a lot of politics involved there that I think, I don't know if that's the finance subcommittee, but perhaps it goes to a subcommittee for recommendation to the council. That would be my, I think, probably a cleaner way of doing that, just so that you don't have multiple nonprofits here during a council meeting asking for funding. And I know we've done it that way for some of our other processes, so that's just a suggestion. I would also ask that there be some type of analytics or some type of information in terms of community benefit. So what that produces either in economic development or generating revenue, or if it is, obviously, the definition of community benefit has many different meanings, but just an identifying factor as to why either we continue that funding or should fund it. I think that's probably, probably a wise thing to do as well, just so that we have full information. Sorry, that was intended to be a question, but it was a comment. I'm sorry about that. So I'll reserve and not give comment. I'll go out to the public. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. Any online?
No comment received.
Okay, and we'll come back to council for final direction. Councilmember Rocha.
Yeah, I am supportive of the policy, and I think that having the Finance Committee be the space to where those changes can be made would be appropriate. The only thing that I would add is, of the potential discussion of moving around some funding, I think that there should be a baseline criteria that if you don't meet this minimum criteria, you will not be up for consideration at Finance Committee. Because if you didn't submit your 501c3 information, if you did not submit your profit and loss of the last year, and it's becoming problematic to be able to get that information to give you the payment, then we don't want to be doing that from the dais. But I think that this is a good process to establish moving forward that is more transparent and ethical, so support it.
Councilmember Sornio.
Yeah, and I'm supportive as well of this this outline, and I would say that while I do agree that there should be some type of information that's given back to us to see what type of community benefit it is, I would just ask that it doesn't be too, too strenuous, too complicated. I say that because a lot of these nonprofit organizations that barely have enough funds to be able to put on the event, they might not be able to know exactly how to collect that data. If you were to ask the Rodeo how many hotel rooms they could get, I mean, those guys are good at that type of stuff. But I would just say that if there's a way that we can do it so that it's just not too burdensome, but maybe it's how many people went to your event, you know, where did you advertise, you know, what was, you know, something like that, where it's just very, you know, ways that we can figure out that information. I think, and you know, I won't say this to anybody that attends these events, but I would say if you see a pretty big crowd there and people having fun, that's a community benefit, especially here in Salinas. So that would be my only ask, is just I think that yes, we need to have something that that they can report back to us. I would just ask that it doesn't be too like burdensome on being able to get that information back to us. The other part that I would ask is just, again, just because I feel that if there is kind of like some scoring system, you're right. How can you, you know, the last thing we would want to do is have a bunch of the Girl Scout troops here in front of us and then have to like kind of weigh out to who we're going to give the funding to, right? You don't want to get into something like that. But I would say in that application, if there's a scoring system that kind of, you know, they're rated, and then, you know, that's what we get back. I think that would make it very transparent so that we can see that. And then also, again, I sound like I'm just repeating what my colleagues are saying, but I think that being able to have a body that oversees it, I think is a really good idea. So thank you.
Real quick, I support what you're saying about making the application process very simple and not too burdensome. A lot of this is more qualitative than it is quantitative in terms of the benefit to the community. So I certainly support that aspect. The other thing that I would just add, though, is at some point we need to have a conversation about community human services, because while it is, well, actually, technically, it's not a sponsorship. That's a joint powers authority allocation. So every member of that board should be contributing to the organization. And so I would just, I want to flag that, because if it goes through the process to where perhaps they don't meet the rubric, at the end of the day, we made a commitment when we created the organization that we'd be contributing financially to the organization. So perhaps that should be not something that's up for sponsorship, but rather a general fund item. Just wanted to point that out.
All right, and I gave my comments already, so direction? Yes, city manager?
Thank you, Mayor. One clarification. I heard you wanted to change.
Can you come up to the microphone just so that we
can't
can?
be heard?
Thank you.
I've never been told I can't be heard until now.
I
Thank you,
just
Mayor.
want to make sure the folks at home can hear you.
The appeal process, I'm hearing it's coming back to this body and not the city council to change up the rules. What say you? I think I heard two different things.
Well, ultimately, this committee will give a recommendation to the city council. Ultimately, the city council at any point could change anything as part of the budget process via a motion. But I think having this body give a recommendation would avoid that from happening.
Okay.
I would agree. Thank you. All right. With that, we'll deem the report received. I think you have some somewhat clear direction. Is that correct?
I do. I would like some make a clarification, or
Sure.
for you to make a clarification here. Is we will not, or not all the community sponsorships will be known at the budget development or budget adoption. So there will be an amount, and then we are going to take in applications and present that to the finance committee.
So I would, and I'll speak to what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the applications come in prior to the budgeting process so that the finance committee reviews that prior to the full budget going to council.
Yes.
That way we're not playing catch up and then that can get complicated if people have budgeted and think that they're getting that money as we approve. Theoretically, I apologize, I don't remember the exact number for the overall contribution.
1.2.
1.2 million, right? But rather, we figure it out ahead of time, and it's part of that budget, and it's very clear what that 1.2 million is going towards.
Yeah, I completely, I agree with that.
I know that that's like, oh, okay, one more thing, and we're T-minus February, but I think it'll be important, particularly around the sensitivity of it last year, that we make sure that it's a very clear, laid out amount and justification as to why staff is recommending those to this finance subcommittee.
And if I can, I'm sorry, I should have said this in my comment, but I just wanted to thank staff because this is something that is going to make this process so much easier. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Yes, city manager, sorry,
Thank you
and then
for
I'll
the
go with
clarification.
Councilmember Rocha.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you for leading some clarification here on all these fronts, because I want to clarify. Some years it might be 1.2 million. Other years it might be 1.5. Other years it might be 0. It's all going to be related to what the budget is. And you'll hear more about not this subject matter, but how the budget's in this afternoon's council suggestion. So we don't want to represent this money every year. Thank you.
And I would just acknowledge, too, having some, because I know when we went through it this past year, people are like, what the heck is the carnival, right? Like, what is a so for staff to be able, and realizing, too, that with turnover and attrition, right, we had a city manager that had only been here a couple of years and a finance director who had only been here a couple of years, and there wasn't a lot of historical knowledge when the council was asking questions about each respective organization. So I think having it come to finance and having us have an understanding of what those organizations are and what they stand for and what they represent in the community will help push that part of the budget along more smoothly to the full council. Councilmember Rocha.
Agreed, and especially when it's laid out in an application process, then you have a record of that. But what I was going to add is the prior city manager attempted to put a deadline, I believe it was sometime in April, get all your requests to me by April. That way it gave greater, I guess you could say, ability to prepare for the budget hearings in May and so forth. So maybe that would be a good application deadline, is sometime March or April. That way you don't have, as we did last year, at the actual budget hearing, people coming forward asking to be included in the budget. And so, yeah, that's my only comment.
Okay, good to go? All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and deem that report received, and I think that is it for us. The next meeting is Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. Thank you.